I am deeply sorry to all Madrid fans out there for letting you endure 2 years without a trophy, for the painful losses we've had to suffer at the hands of our bitter rivals in FC Barcelona, for all the plans that were supposed to materialize that have gone south. I take full accountability for the bad times this team has endured. To make things right, I have decided to step down from my role as the president of Real Madrid. I would like to do so to allow the team to chart a new path, to allow a new era, to allow the page to turn from the dark days we've endured. Thank you for your time, and bye. Like, that should have been it. Instead, we had to endure an epic generational head loss from Don Florentino Perez last Tuesday when he called a press conference for the first time in 11 years to let the press know what was on his mind, to a large extent, the whole world as well. This video is to react to the fallout and the aftermath of that incident. Let's get talking. Hi and welcome to today's video with me, Eben, on Beyond the 90. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching our previous videos. I invite you to like, comment, subscribe, and if you feel up to it, go ahead and share the content as well. We are active on Instagram as well, so you could follow us at Beyond the 90 channel. Without much ado, let's get into today's video. So last Tuesday, the president of Real Madrid, in the person of Mr. Florentino Perez, met the press, and it was anything but a meet the press session. Now, before I get into the meat and the nitty-gritty of the fallout, Real Madrid played on Thursday. At the time of recording, I mean on my time zone, it's still Thursday. Real Madrid played with the already condemned Real Oviedo, and they won 2-0. And I must say, the scenes at the stadium at the Bernabeu were not particularly pleasant. There were whistles and jeers, and Kylian Mbappe suffered the most of them. And you could tell that there was tension in the stadium, and anything but a win for Real Madrid would have been, it would have been disastrous in the stadium. Only God knows what else could have happened that day. Well, how did we get here? On Tuesday, the president of Real Madrid called a press conference, and it's the first time he was doing that in 11 years. And the rumors were filtering through that he was going to announce his resignation from the club, and it was anything but that. And so, without much ado, I'm going to show you just some highlights or a brief summary of what happened during the interview, the things he talked about and the things he said and all that. Okay, so this is what transpired at the press conference. He started by saying that he was sorry, that he won't resign, instead calling for an election early. The election was supposed to happen in 3 years, but he called it this year, and he didn't go into sporting matters. He went on to insist that Real Madrid is not a dictatorship and that people would need to shoot him to take him out. He went on to defend Tchouaméni and Valverde. He picked his phone from his pocket, and that was a really interesting time, screening through his phone to find stuff he didn't like that was said about him. He attacked some journalists. He went on to attack FC Barcelona, calling or implying that they were corrupt and that he had a dossier he was sending to UEFA. he started arguing with journalists and mentioned that he was subscribing from their news their news outlets. He was unsubscribing rather, sorry. He mentioned that Real Madrid had won 74 titles, and that he had led the team to win 7 Champions Leagues and 7 league titles. He went on to blame the press for being the reason why the team has not won some extra trophies. And then he blamed FC Barcelona as well. He called out the fans who were whistling the players and asked them to stop doing that. And then he essentially targeted people who were calling him to resign. And he stated that he was going to open elections. I mean, he had brought elections forward by 3 years. And he gave a 10-day period, like just a 10-day stipulation with which you can pick forms up and apply to become or to contest him to become the president of Real Madrid. He called out someone who is supposed to be Mexican or have Mexican accent, potentially being his rival, because that person would have expressed interest to contest against him. And, he ended up saying Real Madrid is a democratic institution and it's not a dictatorship. But, if you look at the things you need to go through to become a Real Madrid president, or the parameters around which you can pick the forms to become the president of Real Madrid, they are pretty steep, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of people in the next 10 days meet that criteria. So what's the criteria? You'd have to have been a Real Madrid fan for 20 years, which is a given. You have to be Spanish, and this is the kicker. You must, at the time of applying or submitting your forms, in essence, have an escrow worth 190 million euros in your account. So essentially, you need to have some sums of money, which is I think a quarter of the net worth of the club, or a fraction of the entire net worth of Real Madrid. Now, it's going to be difficult to find people who meet that criteria within the next 10 days. And so I don't see anybody coming out of the woodworks to contest Mr. Florentino Perez anytime soon. After this incident at the press conference, the heat was turning up online, and I'm sure it would have got to him, because what does he do? The very next day, he has a sit down with El Chiringuito. I mean, they are a very, very, very big platform in Spain, to essentially do a mopping up or clean up the mess from the press conference the day prior, because he had said some things that were pretty damning and like things you would not expect to hear from someone of his caliber. At this point, it's clear that Florentino Perez is not particularly he's not particularly the person for media communication. Why do I say that? If you go back to the botched Super League agenda, one of the primary reasons why it caused a stir and it robbed people off wrongly was because of the way it was communicated. And who did the communication? Mr. Florentino Perez. Now, I would expect that for a club of that stature and for a person of his caliber, after the meet the press thing, which was not really a meet the press, if you ask me, if there needed to be any, mopping up or cleaning the mess, in quotes, I would think that he would have let someone from the PR team or someone in communications to go sit down with the journalists and explain away and actually draw attention to the salient things and the most important stuff he was trying to pass across. But no, he did it himself. He sat down with El Chiringuito. I mean, to be honest, that interview was much better than the press conference the day prior. And here are a couple of things that, this is a summary of that interview as well. So the interviewer asked him, does he see Mbappe committed? And Florentino Perez, of course, I would expect him to do that, called Mbappe the best player on the team. The interviewer asked him about Haaland and whether it was possible to sign him. Florentino Perez didn't comment on that matter. He spoke, but he didn't really give an opinion. And he went on to say he signed the best players. He mentioned the players he signed, who he thinks are the best. Then they went on to talk about Vinicius, and Florentino Perez mentioned that there was a willingness to renew him and that there was no rush because they still had time. I don't agree with him on this one because time is running out. And he was asked about Xabi Alonso. Was it a mistake? He went on to say it wasn't a mistake, but he talked about certain circumstances that didn't permit things to work well. And then he was asked about FC Barcelona and relationship, and he mentioned that the relationship was completely gone and he didn't think they were going to be able to repair that relationship. Now, on the bit about FC Barcelona, on his press conference on Tuesday, he made some wild allegations. They are not particularly wild because they are not the first time. He won't be the first person to make those allegations. But, someone of his caliber ought to know better to not let certain things come out of your mouth because of the implications they may hold. And so Barcelona responded that they are looking into potentially bringing up legal suits, suing Real Madrid or suing Florentino Perez for defamation. And given the relationship between the two of them having gone south, I see a potential lawsuit coming up, although I don't know if they will see it to the logical conclusion. This is my opinion on everything that has transpired so far. I think the right thing to do was for him to step away. He's not stepping away, so Real Madrid has what they have. I think he needs to cool off, like step away from the media frenzy and cool off, like step away from the public, if you ask me. If you think about Florentino Perez, the idea of Florentino Perez is someone who is calm, collected, a big man, very, very influential person, because people think about Florentino Perez as this genius, and this myth about him is because of the way he carries himself, considering also he doesn't talk a lot, he's very silent. This recent incident has really, if you like, taken a lot away from that perception people had about him. I wouldn't expect him to sit down with the press anytime soon. If Real Madrid has any communication they need to do, I would have the communication people go and do it. I think it's time for him to move away from playing the victim, essentially, because Real Madrid is arguably the biggest club in the world. So I don't see a world in which Real Madrid are the victims. It doesn't bode well and doesn't send the right communication. I would expect that next time in a situation like this, he will hold his hands up and apologize to the fans. And if he's not stepping down, give them hope, give them something they can hold on to instead of making a bad matter worse. because that's essentially what has happened. He just threw more fire into the dumpster which was already burning. And I would expect also that some of his back and forth some of his excesses would really cease, because there was an incident on the pitch when Real Madrid were playing Real Oviedo today, where it seemed like he was having a back and forth with fans, which is not a good look for him. There was a situation in the pitch where some fans had banners of Florentino Perez being asked out, and the security went to seize it. You know, it is getting toxic right now, and he's not helping it. He's not helping it. And at this point, there's a saying. I mean, it's a saying where I come from. They say, who the gods want to kill, they first make mad. And at this point, he's walking that fine line. He's threading that path right now. Being a Barcelona fan, I remember a time where Barcelona had a president not too long ago, who, similar to Florentino Perez, had brought in, or was president at the time Barcelona, chalked some successes, and things began to go south after that. But he dug his heel in, held on too long, and at the time he was eventually forced out. The club had entered into an irreparable state. Like, the damage had gone beyond repair, and it's taken almost a decade, and the club is still reeling from decisions made under that leadership. I mean, his name is Bartomeu, Josep Maria Bartomeu. He ran Barcelona aground. And I'm not saying Florentino Perez is going to run the club aground, but he's not taking accountability. There's a definition of leadership that I like so much. It says leadership is cause, everything else is effect. Now, I'm not purporting to be some leadership guru or to know anything about leading such a prestigious club like Real Madrid. And for a businessman like Florentino Perez, he sure knows what he's doing. But I've got to say that on this one, I think he goofed big time. And the season is coming to an end. I think he can really salvage some image by winning, by setting the club in motion to win. I don't think it's going to, turn around that quickly, because the mess is really deep. I mean, it's a deep mess. And the fans are now beginning to get on the team. Unfortunately, it's coming at a time where it's the end of the season. You can say that's also fortunate, but the fans are going to be leaving the season with a bit of sour taste in their mouth. And so, one day is a long time in football. So, who knows? Spain goes to the World Cup and win. And all of a sudden, everything that happened is just water under the bridge. They start building again, and you never know. Like, things could go your way, and Real Madrid could be at the top again. From where I sit right now, just looking at the whole situation, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But they sure have to start making the right moves. It's been how long of me just sharing my opinions? At this point, I invite you to also share your opinion in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Subscribe, and let's get interactive.